Bruce here, Targeted Wealth Creation. Let's jump into YBIT. This is kind of the sleeper, folks. I see a few people. I'm trying to be very quiet about this, but I'm pretty excited. I don't think a lot of people realize how well it did with its almost 6 weeks. I mean, it is BTC based through BITO, and BITO declared their dividend. And like I said, BITO is huge, right? The amount of people that own that and the ProShares fund, I mean, it's 3 years in existence, massive amount. The volume of just the options alone on BITO are enough for Yieldmax, and considering Yieldmax typically gets high liquidity, right? Because they do institutional level volume of contracts, right? And they primarily use the Flex marketplace within that, which is not available to you and I as a retail guy. If you want to get a Bloomberg terminal and operate like an institution, I guess you could call yourself a individual. Would it be more like a hedge fund? All right. So the caveat here is BITO declared a dividend, right? I think it's the only situation that Yieldmax has a fund. Yeah, there are Microsoft and Meta and some of those that are declaring a dividend, but they're puny, right? They're pennies. And percentage-wise, they're probably 1 or 2%. I don't even bother to look, right? I doubt that any of you care that much. You may own some and go, yeah, I own Microsoft and I get a 1.5% yield. I really don't even know what the yields are. I just know they're not anywhere near Yieldmax, right? And I never viewed them as dividend companies, even though some have started to be dividend companies. Okay, let's jump in here. So this caveat centers around the fact that BITO on 5/31 declared $1.76. I could be off a couple pennies, folks. It seems like it was 1.7679. It could have been 1.7976, but at the end of the day, that number gets subtracted from the previous close, and so the real pre-market value was 25.51. I did that math, right? And so if I just ignored that and I came in here, I'd say, oh, okay, BITO was down 4.11% and YBIT was up 4.13, but that doesn't tell the real story. Just like YBIT, Coney, Misty, 23 of the funds, they all drop by the dividend price, right? Whatever, and I know we call them distributions in Yieldmax, right? But they drop by the distribution amount. And that's set to be the open price for pre-market. That can get bid up or bid down. It's kind of like IPO. If somebody says to you there's a suit, I don't know Reddit's particulars, but for anybody that doesn't know, and I imagine some of you don't and some of you do. So what happens is, and this is famous, Nancy Pelosi kind of thing. So the insiders, people that know people, right, that have money, maybe they influence legislation, maybe they don't, but I just call it the insiders, friends and family and those in the know and the privileged. They get access to super popular, when Google, back in the 90s, whenever, 2000s, when it first went public, Alphabet, right, Google. There's available shares to people that want to get on the IPO early. And then there's retail IPO, right? Well, think about a Yieldmax fund. It comes out and it plans on launching at $20. Based on supply and demand, that can come in, at 1990 or open up at 2011. And so you have all that. So all I'm trying to say is people always say, oh, no, they don't subtract the dividend. That's not right. How come it opened, it wasn't the same drop in the dividend? Well, it is. It just market dynamics change it. Just like this was supposed to be 25.51. Well, nobody said that it couldn't trade, right? You had pre-market, you had all day to trade, and there was the closing price. Well, why was it down? Well, it really wasn't down. It was up 2.54%. Okay? Because this is the real price that gets taken away from the previous closing price. Okay? And that is the dividend amount, right? And how does it work from a NAV? What is NAV, right? Net asset value. We see it on our sheets in the way we're doing accounting here. It is everything they own, assets, liabilities, cash, etc., divided by the number of shares, right? Sometimes people refer to what's the market cap. Well, look at the share price, look at how many outstanding shares there are, and that's when they talk about, is NVIDIA going to be a 3 trillion company? Is, Microsoft 2.9 billion or trillion? Sorry, these are trillion now. Just think about that one. I heard a great one. Anybody hit me up in the comments. I wrote it down, but then I've already forgotten it. And I think it was in seconds. It was like, okay, how much is a trillion? When we talk about the U.S. debt and we say, we're 17 trillion going to 36 trillion. And somebody used, I could go out and calculate. I'm just curious if any of you remembered or saw that. And they said, okay, well, if a dollar was a second and you had $1 trillion, then it's 900 million years or some just, huge number in time. And that, you really connect to that, right? Otherwise, if you say $1 trillion, how tall? Somebody says, well, it's, 500 feet tall. Well, how do you even keep a stack? Do you put a rock on it every, it's better when you use that. So if anybody remembers or knows that one, what's $1 trillion if you have 1 trillion seconds? What's the time? And again, I could Google it or figure it out, but it gives me a chance to have you guys interact. All right, let's jump into the real meat here. So 254 is what it really was. So we had 3 trades, right? We had a couple of synthetics, and we sold our call short. There were 380 contracts, right? Let's look here. No shares were bought, ironically. Now remember, it's meaning they didn't reach a 25,000 volume share count since they last counted the shares. I'm sure there were people buying, right? When I start doing on my videos, although I don't think other people realize this could be a $2 to $3 payer this month. I'm going to talk about it at the end, right? Because I sure think that's what it's going to be paid. Other people, I saw $1, I saw $1.25, I think I saw, people are taking swags. Well, some of my stuff, when I do dividend declarations and predictions, they're swags, right? If I don't have some really looking at the data, and I don't have time to look at all 25 funds, but I probably have a pretty good idea on 10 or 14, probably maybe even half of them, right? And then 4 or 5 that I really watch. So anyway, I'm going to get into this. I promise I won't. So they sold these for 24 cents, right? They continued to sell at 27. Now they were smart, knowing some of these in advance, right? When they were rolling this, they knew what the price was going to be. But when they put in some of these others, they didn't know how much BITO was going to pay, right? So they had to do a guesstimate, and they came down here because they knew that it was going to be 25.51, and then the market was going to take it. So right now they're sitting pretty good. They didn't collect a lot of money. I mean, a lot of money is relative to a new fund, right? So here they are, no new shares, 725,000. All right, so they collected 9 more thousand. Let's go take a look at the synthetics. So they put the same 380, right? Buy a call, sell a put. Well, they get a lot more money, and this is the only thing that I think is keeping them from having a $4 payment or payout, right? Either way you want to call it, distribution. Because these are getting closer. They're 2 weeks from this coming Friday, right? Payday, guys, payday. I'm sure most of you know. I know most of you know declaration is Wednesday, early morning. So we're at 2616. They wrote 36s, and sometimes on the new funds, they go out like that, and then they can write, and it puts money in the piggy bank, even though it's a liability. I'll never forget when people ask me, what do you mean paper profit, right? Paper money. It's not real. Yeah, it's real. It's a liability. It just isn't officially collected. You know, I always give the analogy. I bought a stock at $10. It went to 14. I held it for 6 months. I didn't want to have short-term capital gains, right? I had a 40% profit. You know, if I bought 10,000 shares, I was up 4,000. I had 14,000. Well, you didn't have anything. You had paper value in your account. And then all of a sudden that stock went to $1. How much do you have, right? You got $1,000. Well, you had 14. Well, you didn't really have it, right? You could show it to your accountant, right? But unless it's marked to market and it's truly been valued at that, it's just, you know, what it's worth right now. So that's what we mean, okay? We mean to say that if they had to buy this back right now, because it's $10 almost underneath, right? And a little bit of time premium, right? So it's $9.84 plus time premium, which makes it $10.14. They owe $5.5 million. So that's the only caveat that I want to go out there. So let me jump into payment for anybody that's rushed, wants to see this and get out, and then I'll do a little bit more. So here we are. So we got a little bit more money in here because we sold those, right? So that collected money on the synthetic side, a little bit more. This was 796. And this dropped, well, no, this went up a penny or two, right? We sold another 9,000 in this bucket. Let me make sure that P26, yeah. Yep, that's the right amount. So it added the 9,000, right? So from over here, we went from collecting 26,000 to collecting 35,000. Not a lot, right? But on your payments, so they're sitting there, and just so I show you how this reads, this says they got $849 worth, $8.49 worth that they could pay out. Okay, total income per share. 22 cents of it's in this category. They love to pay out of this. They love for this to reach their IV, implied volatility, right? And pay out of there. But when you make it over here, it's still money in the account. But remember, so the net income's 6. It's a new fund. No matter what, they probably would pay $4.25 and call it a day and say, hey, we got a little extra. But knowing they've got this liability out there, right? The paper loss. Now, that all evaporates if we run up 9 points. Can BITO do that? Can BTC do that? Absolutely, right? I mean, it's probably 78,000 on Bitcoin for that to reflect this, right? But it's possible. Do I really think it will? Hard to say. If I had to bet, I'd say no, it won't. But it could reduce that tremendously. So anyhow, the net for you guys that want to be done is I see this thing between $2 to $3. I'd even go so far as to say I see $2.80 to $3, right? Again, they're going to have one more day. They're going to have tomorrow night or tonight, right? They're going to have Tuesday night to decide and tell us Wednesday morning on all the single stock funds. So somebody in that discussion, it's like college football ranking for you guys that we get to the playoffs and there were 4 teams, you know. I was born in the state of Alabama, so, you know, we moved to California when I was 8. And I lost my southern accent, and I became really a Californian, if you will, and grew up and went through all my schooling and went to Pepperdine and my college, and traveled all around the world and worked for East Coast companies, West Coast companies in the tech industry. But where I was going with that is anybody that knows college football knows these massive debates, right? They get in there, well, no, Oklahoma should go, no, Alabama, no, Georgia, well, Georgia's dominated, but that, and I'm a huge college football fan. I watched college with my grandfather and my father as a kid, and I went to SC games and UCLA games and all that on the West Coast, but I always loved Alabama. And I know there's a lot of haters because Alabama was winning so long under Coach Saban, right? But I'm telling you, I was a fan when they weren't always winning. They had great programs, and I used to argue with my SC guys at work and go to their games and all that. So but I know some of you love it, and I love to just tell you a little bit about me, and you get to know some things. So I still watch all of Alabama's games and root for them. I love their new coach from Washington, just a winner. We got a great basketball program, if anybody hasn't noticed. Up and coming basketball. Okay, enough of that. You guys tell me who you love on your college teams, what some of your memories are. I love to interact with everybody on that kind of stuff. Okay, so I see, they could just go pay, say, $2.80 and call it a day. I think a statement would be $3. Why? Because nobody's paid $3. Misty went all the way to $4.12 and nobody had ever paid $3. Nobody's paid 3 cents. They're high twos. NVIDIA was high twos. Coney paid $2.79. Misty just had a $2.52. And I've got Misty, what did am I $2.42? I'd have to look. I'm going to be doing Misty and Coney together here in a few minutes. I'm late on that. And I got to do GDXY, but GDXY is not paying this month. So, to me, if they don't do 250, it's a crime. It's a crime. If they do 280, I'm happy. I own a lot of it now. I added when I saw this. If they pay 3, I'm thrilled, right? Maybe they want to dig into that ProShare. There's a lot of BITO guys. I go out to the Yahoo BITO group, and they're like, oh, man, that YBIT, that's nothing. If you really want it, own BITO. You get the dividend and BITO. I'm thinking, well, you don't think YBIT isn't going to perform a lot like BITO? It's different. I agree, right? But I think with the Yieldmax synthetics and some of that, it may outperform, right? It's got its own hedging based on front month and later months. I've done futures trading for 20 years. It's some of the most stressful stuff there is out there, right? It's also can be very, very lucrative. It's like options. You got to be right, and you got to be right in the time frame. That's why I've never been a big buyer of calls, right? I've been a seller of calls, a seller of puts. But if I absolutely think something's going to fly and I think it's going to happen the next 3 weeks, then I give it 2 months and I buy calls. And then the only risk I have is the call premium. But I tell you, 90% of the time, most retail people lose. Unless you're a seasoned veteran and you get it right, you're not going to win on your calls. So the Charles, I think you've asked me, I forget your name a lot about options. So I'll just throw some little education points in here. All right, I'm going to go back for anybody that needs to run, go. I'm just going to do some holdings and that kind of stuff for 3 or 4 minutes. So you got my gist on this, right? Don't think they're going to pay 4. Think there's little, under 3% chance they're going to pay 4. Maybe 20% chance they're going to pay 3. 70% chance they're going to pay 250 to 280, with 280 winning over 250 to just say, look at me. Okay. So on the holdings, this is that liability, right? It's 5.1 million. But that assumes it's $10 underneath, right? If we start moving up, it's going to be 2 million. All we have to do is get up to 32 or 33, right? Here, we're winning, not as much. We added 300 here, 380, sorry. But we're still 8.92. Look at these. These smaller ones, well, this one's not that small. We're 63% captured, right? So we're sitting on 27.34% of the money written on these guys. Not bad, but they played it. You know, I beat up the fund managers, and people ask me all the time, you know, somebody asked me the other day, hey, is the Coney and Misty, do we have the good ones there? Honestly, we don't have the insight. I hope one day, I've heard people talk about, hey, it'd be great to talk to the Misty or Coney guy. It could be the same guy. What we kind of know, just hearing from Jay, he's got a team. Ulti is so many stocks. Remember, they own the stocks in Ulti, and they write covered calls, and they're constantly getting out of them and adding new fund. Think of that, right? I'm guessing that these fund managers do 4 to 6, depending on how good they are. That's a guess. So that guy's watching 4 to 6 single stock Yieldmax ETF funds. Okay? So they can make little mistakes, right? Because they're sticking to a prospectus, they're sticking to, we're going to write these calls 5 to 15%, we're going to do this, we're going to capture the yield. You know, I'm looking at this anally. I'm saying, buy it back. I mean, I'll tell you real quick the story of where, you know, it was on a Thursday. It was going to expire on the week, and we sold it for like $8. They could have bought it back for $1. So I did, 1/8. Okay, that's 87.5% of the premium that we've already been paid, and it was like, you know, 5-6 million. Let's keep it. Let's buy it back because we dipped way down. They didn't buy it back. The next day, it flew up, and they bought it back at like 25. You know, and so the difference was like 14 million. The difference was like $1 in the payout. All because it was conservative. It was like, well, that fund manager, it's not his money, right? He's just operating. How can somebody fault him? Well, yeah, but what if it would have gone down and I could have bought, you know, had bought it back for a penny? Then I'm squeezing that turnip, right? But to me, 87.5%, when you've been losing and it dropped way down, just take it off the table. So anyway. I see fund managers, I don't know that they miss it. They just follow a protocol or a judgment, right? Maybe I said it in one of my long rants. It's marching orders. I don't know. I just know how I treat options, right? And I've made those mistakes. I've let it run. I used to hate to buy back when it was down in the pennies. But I can tell you 10% of the time that's something I sold a put for $1.50, right? You know, 10 contracts. I got $1,500. I'm sitting on that put. The stock's moved up. There's little chance it's out 2 months, right? I can capture 93% of the money on the move that just happened. And I go, nah, it's 7 cents. I'll just let the 7 cents disappear. All of a sudden, some news, something comes out, that stock drops, and now I'm back to being even. I don't have any profit, right? My 1,500 is I got to buy it back for 1,500 if I don't want to get the stock put to me. So I've seen it. I just go, well, what do you care about the 7 cents, right? And so if I don't have that experience, how can I call somebody out, right? But again, I don't know their situation. Okay, I'm all done, guys. You know, me personally, I think I gave you good stuff today, but hope it's not perceived as a rant. Okay, so that's what you got on your weeklies. Everything's looking good here. Obviously, I want this to move up in time, but they're going to make a decision to, you know, tomorrow night that we'll see on, or tonight. I keep saying tomorrow night. It's tonight. Hell, we're an hour and a half away from the market open on Tuesday. So tonight they're meeting, right? Okay, that's what I got for you. Nothing else is really that important here to just go through minutia. Okay, Bruce out. See ya. This is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. Have a good one.